Hi, this is Zena Harris.
And I'm Mark Rabin.
Welcome to the tie-in. Hey, Mark, good to see you this week.
Hey, Zena. Lovely to see you as well. I love that we have different backgrounds every time, or you do. I keep the same background so that you can't tell what's going on. Where are
Oh,
you?
I know. I just blur my
A
background.
church?
And yeah, no, I'm on set. Is that believable? Like, no, I'm on a film
Maybe.
set.
Yeah, you've got good light.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no, I'm this week I'm up in my attic because we're having work done on my house.
Okay, nice. All right.
So,
Well,
problem
t
solving, right? It's what we
yeah,
do.
tie in coming to you from Zena's attic.
I mean, why not? Why not?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
everything's a work in progress. Oh my gosh. What are you up to this week, or what are you getting into these days?
Well, it's beautiful British Columbia right now. It's getting to summer and it's
Mm,
festival season and event season. So, that's where sort of I had sort of started Portable Electric was in the event and festival season and also in the Burning Man, the regional Burning Man events. And so there's Otherworld that's happening not
right.
this weekend, but next weekend, like the June 5th to the 9th. And that's a regional Burning Man event on the island, on Vancouver Island. And it's about 3,300 people. And it's my first time going. I'm really looking forward to seeing who's doing what in terms of the camps and what they're doing for power and renewable energy. And so I'll be, cruising around, checking stuff out
You do
and
behind the
and
scenes?
hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully we'll see how it is. But yeah, I'm definitely going to see what's going on. Yeah, these regional Burning Man events are so cool, and they're all over the world. So
Okay.
there's almost like more people that go to the regional burns than to Burning Man itself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's super cool, and there's also another one on the mainland here called What If. It used to be called Burn in the Forest. Now they changed the name. So so yeah, so it's fun. And then I've got my own little thing as well that I've mentioned here in the past called Friends Club, and
Yeah.
that's up in the mountains. It's my crew, the higher ed crew, and it's a lot of fun. So anybody who's in Vancouver or Seattle or around that wants to come to that, shoot me a message and happy to connect you with some a
D-
discount code.
yeah. Oh, so you buy tickets to it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
full
Okay.
full
It's a
thing.
full
It's like
event.
it's a
Okay.
full 3 4 day event.
Wow.
Yeah, we do 2 meals a day. There's a lot of like
Oh,
workshops and connection and DJs and music and art. So it's pretty
fun.
cool. Yeah, so
Fun.
that's kind of what's going on for right now, and just grounding into to on the coast here for the next little while.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And what about yourself? What's going on?
Yeah. Well, mine's, it's not so as excited as as yours. Like I'm I'm like drilling into a new curriculum. Yay, with the US Green Building Council. Doing an advanced session after doing a big listening tour. We honed in, everybody seems to want energy. So
Mm,
want sort of advanced training on energy management, energy planning, that sort of thing. So I might be hitting you up for that, Mark, to
yeah.
have a conversation there. So that's exciting. And I've got some travel coming up. I'm going to the Green Sports Alliance, and we've got a session
Where's that?
there. That's in Miami, June 10 to 12.
Nice.
So we'll be talking sustainability in sports and sports broadcasting specifically. I've got a session on that, so that's exciting. It's really cool stuff. So for the folks who do go to that conference, hit me
Mhm.
up. I could even do like fun little interviews and maybe we can air them here or something like that.
Yeah.
So,
Like
um,
what is happening in green sports?
Well, it's interesting. I like to think of we always think about stakeholder mapping, right? When you are looking at markets and what's going on, who's who, and that sort of thing. So the big ones in the sports industry, it's like a trifecta. It's the leagues and teams, and then it's
Hmm.
the venues, and then it's the broadcaster, right? The
Hmm.
leagues and the team side, they're doing a lot of, many sustainability efforts. The venues as well, like, integrating into the venue system, thinking about food, reuse, waste, energy on facilities, these sorts of things. Broadcasting is really interesting. We need to think about power. We need to think about power and logistics, right? So those are big things to consider. So we're going to talk about that and talk about the nitty gritty of how we integrate into these other stakeholders. So yeah, I think it's a conversation, it's an evolving field, and
Hmm.
excited to
Yeah.
be in
And
the
it's
mix.
it's kind of adjacent to obviously like the live events and stadium
Mhm.
tours and so on, right? I mean, it kind of they
Yeah,
reference each other, and I mean they're in some of the same venues.
totally. It is a live event. Like if
Yeah.
you like you cannot the power cannot go down,
Right.
right? Or you lose your broadcast and that's like millions of dollars of like ad stuff and,
Yeah. Yeah.
millions of
Totally.
fans who then don't have the game. I mean, the
Yes. Very
game's going
similar.
on, right? If
Then
they
you've got
don't.
the food and or whatever, the services, and then all the
Yeah.
cups and trays and so on as well.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But, me, I'm like behind the scenes doing, broadcast stuff and interfacing with the
Yeah.
crew and, all of that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cool stuff happening out there, a lot of good jobs that come
Hmm.
in and around all of this. And what's interesting, I think, is, we're going to hear from Dax Patton here on this upcoming episode. And he talks a lot about his career path, right? It's not linear, right? You didn't have a
Hmm.
linear career path to what you were doing.
No, and I mean, you and I have talked about this on the podcast before, but I never imagined that I would be in where I'm at now. When I started doing a geology degree and then worked in the oil business as a geologist, and yeah, so it's just like, but all of those experiences, built up to where I am today, and I fell in love with energy and the energy transition in the
Hmm.
early 2000s, and then yeah, and then business, of course, so like just moving into that side of the business, and now sort of focusing on early stage energy technology and startup stuff. So you
Yeah.
never know, you just never know where you're gonna land.
I know, I know. Well, I think that's the fun thing about this upcoming episode is that this guy, I mean, started, in a totally different industry and kind of took us through his career path. Ocean burial. I mean,
Yeah.
think about this. Like, this is real life. This is what people are doing in their careers and all this stuff. This kind of, human experience is what goes on TV, right? Or can be incorporated into stories, right? And then
Hmm.
green burial, like
Yeah,
somebody's job could be, like there's a character out there waiting to have that and make it a
absolutely.
thing, right? You can write this stuff in.
This is what media and pop culture have the opportunity to tell these different stories and take us in different directions and normalize certain things, right? That we otherwise would think would be taboo or weird. Even, there's a lot more talking about death or about,
Yeah.
that sort of passing on to the to the other world. So yeah, see, it was a good chat. And so yeah, we hope that you guys really enjoy our interview with him. A bit,
Hmm.
a bit windy of an interview. So yeah, but we get to the meat for sure.
Yeah. 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 And yeah, well, Mark, have fun in your, in festival season.
Thanks. Yeah.
So
And I do want to give a shout out to Chris Martz from Green Wave Rentals for helping us out with rentals for the next few events. So thank you, Chris, for all your help and support over the years.
all right. Well, with that,
Yeah.
let's get to Dax Patton. All right, we are here with Dax Patton, He is the co-founder and executive director of Spirit Oceano Foundation, a 501(c)(3) nonprofit dedicated to expanding awareness and public access to sustainable burial at sea. Through education, advocacy, and community partnerships, Spirit Oceano is helping redefine what meaningful, eco-conscious end-of-life options can look like. Dax is a serial entrepreneur and strategic marketer. He has spent his career launching and scaling ventures that touch nearly every industry, from tech and healthcare to advertising and sustainability. He built Pickled Agency, his own creative marketing firm, to accelerate the growth of his ventures and empower other founders to do the same. At the heart of everything Dax does is a drive to build impactful, innovative solutions that challenge convention and serve the greater good. Whether it's helping brands tell their story or championing new rituals for our final moments, Dax is always looking ahead to what's next. We're excited to have you on, Dax. Welcome.
Thank you for reading the bio. Very important.
I think it is. It's really cool to know where people are coming from.
I could write that thing, 100 different ways, but I'm appreciative of it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being on, Dax. I mean, now that we've got a little bit of that background, it's like we'd love to hear just a little bit more about what makes you tick and what you're passionate about, but also like how does someone go from being a creative marketing and communications person to someone who is championing green burial?
Yeah, um, two great questions. Yeah, you know, this one life that we have to live, some time ago now, I kind of dedicated it to doing as much good, as possible with this one life I've got. And so I just try to like point myself in that direction of whatever that is. And so that's kind of like helped kind of build kind of a why for why I do everything. And yeah, and then kind of jumping into the journey that you asked. I'm from Austin, Texas. I'm an eighth generation Tejano, Canary. We came from the Canary Islands of Spain, and our families got here in like the 17, 1800s, and so I'm very deep rooted in history and just impact and so I guess storytelling and just so much. So in short, I went to school at Texas Tech University. I studied marketing and advertising. I went into corporate society and corporate life in the midst of a recession, the 2007, 2008 crazy times. And so really just as an individual, just and a young working professional, just trying to find that direction. And while corporate society and staffing and recruiting wasn't always what I expected, but it really taught me that, companies, what makes up good companies is the best people.
Mhm.
And so, it also taught me that I can learn about different niches. For example, I was dedicated to environmental and engineering, and this is 2008, 7. And so I was a recruiter calling geologists and geoscientists and all these people and asking them if they were interested in a job that I had. And everyone was interested in the job at that time. Um, and they were a lot trying to move to Texas. Anyways, that's a whole nother story. But um, I became a subject matter expert, in basically like the entire life cycle of construction from the preliminary stages and the geotechnical investigations and the phase 1, phase 2 remediation and all this stuff. And I had a business degree. I'm like,
Mhm.
but I could tell you a lot about a professional engineer and a professional geologist and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I'm also learning about the hiring process. And I interviewed more people, looked at more resumes, hired more people, even fired more people than any young fresh out of college student kid should be doing. But yeah, I just kind of like learned about business and this whole cycle of recruiting and staffing, and I was like, had no interest in it whatsoever, but I found the passion within it.
Yeah.
And I found the reason. I got to help people in the hardest economic times, like find jobs.
Mhm.
But I also had to deal with the people that didn't fit those requirements, but I did it with compassion. Luckily no one hung up the phone and said, "Hey, F off, kid." So anyways, where I'm going with that is like I wanted to be a marketer, and but we all have to deal with these stages in life, the timing, the everything. And so whatever it is, I left that company in 2010. It
Mhm.
took me to Oklahoma and to Dallas, and I finally got back here to Austin in 2011. And I'd done this corporate society thing. I was, I had the opportunity to find something new, and my buddies were starting this tech startup, and they were building touchscreen computers and touchscreen tables and putting them in restaurants and doing hospitality stuff. And so I got interested in technology, and I learned how to build touchscreen computers and displays. And it was three of us. I was playing the chief marketing officer. So I finally got that marketing role I wanted, but it was
Yeah.
self-instilled. And yeah, and so that kind of, but pointing me in the direction of innovation and technology and everything that's coming with that. And that was from 2010 to 2015. And then from there, and that was such an agnostic technology. I learned how agnostic that was,
Hmm.
right? With film and content and the content creation process looks so much
Mhm.
different than it did just back then. Just
Hmm.
when I was putting on the marketing hat, right? And I was starting to, drones really hadn't come out quite yet, but you'd still had to go get a helicopter for that, video shot. But then we, had drones come into the play, and then it was like, oh my gosh, I can do so much more, save so much budget. And then there was software development, and I learned about building teams, and I learned about bootstrapping businesses, and I learned about production and worked with so many different industries and then that led me into South by Southwest, and then that was just like everything I thought technology, that startup and the innovation and the agnosticity of innovation kind of led me to, this other job playing entrepreneur at a film festival at one of the largest conference and festivals, most influential conference and festivals in the world, South by Southwest, been going on for over
Mhm.
35 years. They were my client with this tech startup. I was starting to work with like clients like IBM, and we gave Watson Vision for the first time, the IBM, the supercomputer. In
Mhm.
2013, I was working with a buddy who was much smarter than me, but I had this software license that used a webcam, and you could hook it up to a computer, and then it used facial detection technology, and it could tell somebody's gender, their age, their emotions, and all this stuff. And so, South by, I ended up landing a project with South by, and we were using it for analytics. We were doing touchscreen stuff, and that got me other projects and led me to my first job in a long time, which was with this South by Southwest, and where I'm going with like how and the why and the journey. And it's really just been an agnostic thing because South by, for example, is a music festival, it's a film festival, it's a comedy festival, it's a
Technology.
conference, it's
Yeah.
a technology conference.
Yeah.
And it's a conference and festivals, plural. So the conference part has 23 tracks of subject matter. I think 22, however, it changes each year.
Uh-huh.
When they find a need of some other type of innovation because they're thinking 5 years out,
Hmm.
like they will add a track to that. So they had, at the last minute, they added a machine learning like sub track this year because you had so much AI content, but then you had like the parts coming into the actual hardware and the dues and the large language models and all that stuff. So, anyways, going back to your question, very
Yeah.
long-winded, and I'm so sorry.
No, but
Yeah, this
you were
is
very much
great.
you were very much built and prepared for these times.
Yeah,
That's kind of my, when I'm hearing you talk about that, I mean it's right. Fresh new face, 10
yeah.
albums later. No.
Yeah, I mean that, and so that takes me to 2020, right? And so from 2015 to 2020, spending this time at this event and learning about the film and production and working with the studios and all that stuff. And I want to make sure I lean into some of that, in this conversation
Mhm.
because that's where I learned so much about the industry. And I had to do the same thing with music. I knew the interactive, the technology, the all that tech stuff. I was where I was, comfortable in the marketing and the conference side. But it was like this, the film and the music, but really they complement each other so well because the, conversion, of technology and the arts, is changing so much. And then today, so that we'll go past the pandemic. Yeah, I stayed home a lot.
Mhm.
And we all, had to figure out what the new norm was and then now coming out of it and this new outlook on life almost that we have. Today, that's brought me to kind of like I knew I wanted to build something bigger, I just and have more of that good impact in life. And I was learning how to be an entrepreneur. I consider myself a learned entrepreneur, but I learned, and I knew, I started pointing myself in this direction of good. And so I've been just like leaning into that with my own marketing agency. I can take on all the good clients I want, and I don't have to work with, the bad.
Mm-hmm.
But or with and so I started doing A, B, and C testing, with different ventures. One was an AI venture, didn't work out. One was you know, partnership with my buddy who also had an agency, did enjoy it, still buddies, didn't work out. But then we've got, Pickled Agency, which has been continued to grow and has been my foundation. It's my digital marketing agency and we can scale things fast. But then we have, today my time is being spent, making money so I can actually invest in my nonprofit.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I gave you a lot of context there. But really one day, um, I was sitting there and one of my clients from my marketing agency, from Pickled, somebody, one of my clients called me and told me, "Hey, Dax, I was watching this documentary. It was a BBC documentary. You can go find it. It's where a whale dies and the body, sinks to the bottom of a barren part of the ocean. And over time, these biologists or whatever, found this, or maybe, set it out there or whatever, but they were recording it and documenting it. And all these sea life and crustaceans and all these things started feeding off of it. And then over time, the time lapse of this video, weeks or months, however long it was, you know, this what would have been a desert within the ocean created was an ecosystem created by this whale carcass that gave life after death.
Mm-hmm.
And so this client, now my co-founder and fellow board executive board member, um, yeah, he brought this idea to me. He was like, Dax, I had this aha moment. I think we could apply this to, burial at sea. I've been researching it, and it's under the EPA guidelines, and it's regulated under that. And there's 23 states with oceanfront property,
Mhm.
and right now, like there aren't any resources for it. It's the most underutilized, but it's one of the oldest traditional forms of burial. And guess what, Dax? It's also the most eco-friendly, sustainable forms. And he's like, Dax, like, I've been thinking about this and thinking about this. I think he'd been watching this documentary a couple of years before this, actually. And so, anyways, but he told me about it, asked me, you know, if I could start looking into it. And, there I go, and I put on my marketing hat and I start diving in. No pun intended.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
anywho, Um, I don't know if that covers what that covers, but I'll let you ask another question and we can go from there, or
Well,
how you would like me to take this.
Well, you know what? I just love it. I love it because I love hearing your story and kind of how you've navigated your career path and whatnot. Because I think it's just important to hear these kinds of true, real stories, even for the young people out there who are kind of thinking about what they may want to do. There's no real linear path, right? Like you do take twists and turns. Even if you're in the same industry forever, it's going to probably take twists and turns. And I love hearing how you navigated that and kind of what led to the next thing and how you were, thinking about it and whatnot. So in that regard, I find it quite inspiring to hear like, a true and honest story about it. So thanks.
Unscripted, and
There we
I left
go.
out a lot.
Oh, I know. We all do. But you know what? One thing when you were talking about working in human resources, that was my first job too at a large company. And I feel your challenge, your frustration, because I was also hiring, onboarding, firing, all the stuff. And it just, that brought back a little
Valuable knowledge,
memory.
valuable
Yeah,
knowledge to have. And
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
so yeah, where should we go next?
Well, I mean, I think when maybe just, kind of just curious, like on what green burial then entails, right?
Yeah.
What is that? Because right now, when we think about, funerals and cemeteries, obviously that's imprinted in our minds, both from our own experiences, but also, movies and how we view funerals and um so how does that change? What does that look like when someone is buried at sea? Because my visual from being buried at sea is more like pirates and or a sort of a military style off the plank and a salute and off you go. But that's not really what we're talking about here, or is
Well,
it?
it is and it isn't. Um,
Okay.
yeah, it is and it isn't. So backtrack just a little bit. It's interesting. Yeah, we have a family cemetery in our a historic family cemetery right outside of San Antonio, Texas, and there's people from the early 1800s and Texas Rangers and people that were there at the Alamo and all that, and my family's there, and they've all been cremated. We have a very, very small plot in this family cemetery, and so even in order to get everyone into the family spot plot, we've been cremating it, all our family, as does 60% of all people in the United
Mm,
States. And so the other half of those people in the US do traditional ground burials with the use of embalming fluids and metals for caskets and plastics and things like that. And so, but that's our industry. That's about 95% almost today. It's changing a little bit, 96% probably, of all people choose these, two other types of traditional burial, cremation and ground burial. There's this other, today, when I started this, I think it was at 1%, but today they say it's at 4% of all people choose green burials. And
okay.
so, that's and to put it in some context for you, one single cremation uses about over 400 pounds, has a over 400-pound carbon footprint.
Mm,
Hmm.
It's
okay.
like driving your gas-powered car from New York to Chicago.
Okay.
And so, you multiply that by all the people in the world,
Hmm.
in the US and the world and all that stuff. It's like a trail of carbon just going across, right? And so, then the ground burials, we got land usage and all that stuff. So, anyways, for some reason, no one's really questioned or
Right.
has really made too much of an impact on changing things. And I'm not sure
Mm.
completely why yet. But we have this little other method.
Mhm.
We've got an ocean that has about 80% coverage, 76% coverage of the Earth in comparison of our land, 30 whatever percent, 20, don't hold me to any of these statistics,
Mhm.
but you get it.
Yeah.
One
You
third is
get it.
land. That's
Yeah.
fine.
And so we'll leave it to scientists, which I talk to, and the biologists, all the things. But anyway, so yeah, and so like, there's this underutilized method that has been around for ages. The U.S. Navy today is the largest provider of burial at sea.
Hmm.
And you can, if you are a service, man or woman,
Mhm.
and you've, you know, you've passed away, you have privilege to, burial at sea. Either the scattering of ashes, so they do cremation first, ashes at sea, or a full body burial at sea. And so regulation is under EPA guidelines, Marine Protection Sanctuaries Act. And yeah, it's, um, the last time they documented how many sea burials were done in the US that I've seen, and I keep checking all the time, but the report was 2020, and it was only like either like 1,200 or 2,100. And and how many people in the US die a year? I think it's a very big, it's a pretty big number.
Probably. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
either in the hundreds of thousands or in the millions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A
Um,
lot of people.
right. And so, yeah, and then we have like all these oceans. And then, so if you do go look at the industry today, a majority of the providers are providing scattering of ashes at sea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very few provide, full body burial, and it's usually something at a premium. And so, it's not accessible to many. It's not done, particularly in an eco-friendly first manner. I mean, it is followed under the EPA guidelines. They do require biodegradable materials to be used. They require you to go to 3 nautical miles out from shore and at least not 6 feet under, but 600 feet
Mm.
under. And so those are the requirements, the minimum requirements for conducting, a burial at sea. And then after that burial at sea, you report back to the EPA, or the captain does, the coordinates and the details, of who the person was and where they're resting.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of, I guess that answers your question probably, long-winded, but really I'm kind of a problem solver type person, and and I saw like a kind of like the opportunity to reimagine burial at sea today,
Mm-hmm.
burial at sea, full body burial at sea today in an eco-friendly, scalable manner. And I think that's done through education and awareness and I love that I'm here with you guys because we're talking about the industry, the film industry, and how are we placing, end of life services, within film,
Mm-hmm.
media. And so it's kind of interesting that, as I started a nonprofit called Spirit
Mm.
Oceano Foundation. It's a 501(c)(3). Um, I've been working on this for probably 3 years, now, give or take. Um, and we started the nonprofit because, like, it really is an education place. It is really an awareness play
Mm-hmm.
before any of the other things because, you know, it's going to disrupt some stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to bring light to, the way things are being done today.
Mm-hmm.
and how maybe they're not really evolving with the times. And we're gonna, help champion this green burial. We're calling ours blue burial.
Yeah.
But, this green burial, movement that has been really picking up traction.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
the surveys out there, everyone wants one.
Right. Can
Like
someone do
everyone
it?
wants a green burial. You take a survey, it's like 70 something percent of all people. Like they're
Can
like
someone do it though? But there's also, family norms and social norms and so on.
religious norms,
That's
everything. Yeah.
probably the biggest challenge or to overcome. But can someone do this today,
Yes.
other than a Navy, personnel or a
Yes. There's a provider on the East Coast. There's providers on the West Coast.
hmm,
Yes.
that are affiliated with Spirit Oceano? Okay.
We're just a
Right.
nonprofit. We have nothing to do with the actual, but we are focused on, I don't want to say that because we are focused on raising a grant. And
Mm.
we're starting this grant called, Sea Burial Grant, and we want to pay for as many sustainable sea burials as possible for underprivileged individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Interesting.
but we're actually faced with an issue there because, the cost is so great today,
Yeah.
and and so, you can go online and you can research it and you can find the pricing and yeah, some of you can find things starting at 9, 10,000 bucks, to
Yeah.
14,000 bucks. And, we think it doesn't need to necessarily be done, the way it's being done today. Again, like, there's a whole education play and we're really trying to also be very science and focused because, you know, I'm focused on doing good. We're focused on doing good at Spirit Oceano Foundation. And if this isn't good, if this isn't better than where we're at, like we're not interested.
Yeah.
And so,
Hmm.
but unfortunately, the bar is set very low. And so, just in comparison, the 400-pound carbon footprint for a single cremation, then you got a 225 or 50-pound carbon footprint for a ground burial with the
Mm-hmm.
embalming fluid and all that. Let's say a full body burial at sea, done with a biodegradable shroud. Let's say you're supposed to, EPA requirements require like weight,
Hmm.
in certain regulations. And so, to send it, directly to the bottom of the ocean. But yeah, that's a sea burial, eco-friendly sea burial is 25 pounds
Right.
in comparison.
But I mean, I guess there's obviously the fuel for the boat and
That's the boat ride.
and that, yeah.
It's basically
That's
the
the
boat
boat ride.
ride. Yeah.
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 And so everything, if done right, can be consumed by the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I one of the things that is interesting about this to me is that you're taking a topic that in an industry that um, people either don't really want to talk about a lot because it has to do with death and that sort of thing, and you're kind of like flipping it on its head and bringing it out into the open and saying, hey guys, like here's a thing, here's a cool thing, and even disrupting kind of this legacy type industry. um, and you use the word reimagining, which I think is so important for you know how innovation happens, right? And it's so interesting to me that you're looking at it in an industry that tends to be kind of one of those like, you know, hush hush, or don't let's not talk about death, or let's not talk about the
Hmm.
process, or maybe we need to do it once with our lawyer and our will, like that kind of thing. And you're kind of like, now it's kind of more common conversation, and like, let's think about this and how might we want to do this. So I appreciate that approach to questioning why we're doing things the way we're doing and how could they be better, and kind of this sort of more open, transparent type of conversation.
Yeah, and just to kind of touch on that point is, yeah, and I learned that early on. I had no interest in jumping into the death industry,
Mm.
whatsoever. But yeah, I've lost loved ones. I'm a very empathetic, empathic person. You know, I, it's, I've had, when you're talking to one person, they might be totally comfortable with it, and you're talking to another, and they may have lost a loved one the day before.
Right,
It
right.
is, it comes in different stages, and there are sensitivities. I feel fortunate to be a communications person, so I can, navigate that a little bit better. But yeah, it's like today, something I learned really early on in this green burial space is it's important that we start normalizing the conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
it's important that it's not because it's just one part of life. And like you have so many cultures around the world, that, spend, time, with their loved one after they pass. The family is there gathered, there's so many different rituals and things and norms. But in the US, for example, yeah, it is a stigma or it's tough. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's tough for sure. But I think education and that's what they really champion, when
Hmm.
in this green burial space, it seems like is normalizing that conversation and starting that conversation earlier.
Yeah.
And so, we think, as a marketer, right, with generation Z or, they're a very emotional, crew and audience, right? But they're very eco-conscious
Mm-hmm.
and so, you know, uh, it's
I think,
important, I think, hitting them at a younger age and normalizing the conversation earlier and not
yeah.
being, shy about it is important.
Mm-hmm.
And further to that, something we've touched on here and there, but also in my own personal work is really around grieving, right? And I mean, and this is like we really, and I mean, look, our parents never taught us that. And society doesn't teach us grieving. It was more like, you buck up and move on, and that's that, right? But a lot of the at the core, there's these sort of we haven't really learned how to grieve or been taught how to grieve, and there's probably an opportunity around this um, to start to speak about that, but also to speak about the planet, right? And speak about where we're at today, as we're faced with all types of different challenges that we really aren't equipped to handle. And I think that's part of it. So, I mean, do you see Spirit Oceano being able to steward some of those conversations around grieving? And I don't know, maybe that's a more philosophical question, but it's like that's kind of what's come to my mind as I think about this. Because I mean, putting somebody underground or in the ocean, that's one thing, but what's the ritual around that and sort of where are we taking that? Because we all need to learn how to do this and be better at it.
Love that question. And yeah, where we've kind of seen it is kind of setting, well, with the grieving and stuff, stepping back and mentioning that, we want to be just sensitive to it and cognizant of it. And I think it's, we want to tell the stories, we want to be storytellers as well and, show them how, sustainable practices like this can help that process, can embrace it. And people, this is their last wishes. This is their biggest chance to, their last chance to, in some cases, not all, but, to make a, impact with your final wish, right? And so that can be really meaningful and special. And then, how do we shape what that ceremony looks like? And this will kind of lead me into where I'm going, but, we think we need to champion it and kind of set a new standard, or set a new norm, and it's not necessarily that, maybe a burial ceremony doesn't have to take, place at a time when, the deceased is there, right? I mean, if you're doing a sea burial and there's coordinates and you have this special place on Earth, and when all your loved ones who cared about this person can get to this destination or this location, maybe they're coming from out of town, all that stuff, it's kind of like, But today it's like everyone thinks you got to have a ceremony at sea, and so there's other ways we can repurpose, you know, old fishing boats in the off season, right? Or,
Electric fishing
and
boats
yeah, or electric
charged
motors,
by solar.
or, there's so many ways and perspectives you can look at this, but it's kind of like normalizing it, but also keeping space for the memory, and all
Mm-hmm.
that. So, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we, and then so kind of moving past and looking at today, right? The standard is set by the Navy, and you can go and check DoD footage from 1940s
Oh.
and find, Navy aircraft carriers, Navy ships conducting burial at sea.
Yeah.
And then you can go to 1960, and then you can go to the 2000s. It is the same darn thing. It is wild. It looks like, it's just you put in a different film tint over the
Mhm.
camera. And so it's very respectful. They do you know, the the gun salute, uh, all the traditions, right? And so, and they do it a certain way. Most of the people are cremation, because if you do want a full body burial at sea, the remains need to, stay, in a certain place until a ship, a Navy ship is, leaves port, that is conducting, those burials. And sometimes that's not, extremely convenient and there's additional cost for the family. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's a little bit of a pain point, for people who in the military that would actually even like to have a burial at sea,
Mm-hmm.
because they are responsible for all the transportation and everything to that point. So anyways, but where I'm going back is like Navy set the bar, EPA set the regulation. We're kind of focused at exceeding those. We want to
Mm-hmm.
maintain that tradition and the respect that the Navy is instilled, but we want to step it up from what the EPA requirements and all their Navy and the Navy requirements, and find that best practice and educate the world on this. Here's our recommended method
Mm-hmm.
for an eco-friendly burial at sea. I I say eco-friendly and I versus sustainability in some standpoints because, and not everyone maybe know this, I had to learn this early on, is like, eco-friendly, has an impact, right? So sure, if we have a 25-pound, carbon footprint with the boat ride out for a sea burial, it's not sustainable, right? We're not taking it in the opposite direction so anyways, I just say that because I want to be very sensitive, to that
Hmm.
word and the sustainability and give it all the respect that it requires and needs and should have. So anyways, but I don't know. I think I don't want to get too off subject. I'm just saying, there's definitely there's a respect to it. It's very inclusive with, whoever. It should be more inclusive with cost. That's our a variable we're trying to fix and
Mm-hmm.
denormalize. And then yeah. So anyways,
Well,
I was probably getting off.
Dax, no, it's great. I mean, this is really really great. Um, and so yeah, so like last thought here, and then we'd love to hear just a little bit of where people can find Spirit Oceano. So, um, your background in media and, our take on entertainment here, there's a real opportunity here as well to start to integrate this into climate storytelling, but also the storyline
Mm-hmm.
for productions. Maybe that's also a role that Spirit Oceana can start to do is start to figure out, okay, how does this become a topic into like, entertainment or into the stories that we're telling? Because this is all about telling stories, as and you mentioned. So, yeah, maybe just a little bit touch on that, and then maybe where we can learn about Spirit Oceano and Foundation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'd love to see that. I mean, it's not all Vikings and bows and arrows,
Right?
flaming tips,
Hmm.
but it can be. Oh, no. Yeah, well, I'm kind of looking to get away from that, and I love, something that kind of, since I've been doing this, and then again coming across, y'all. and kind of thinking about, the crossover of, the industries. Um, it's like, yeah, like we would love to see that. And maybe it's something that is part of our content marketing strategy or focus or
Mhm.
PR, right? Or whatever
Yeah.
that outreach, that, engagement looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give a little shout out. My wife, she's a PhD, history professor. And so, I always got to make sure I have my facts straight, with her. And we love the history, right? I mean, there's so much still to be unearthed,
Mhm.
from all around the world and different cultures and stuff. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting, I think, to even think about that level of it, because, that's as the filmmakers are, right? And it's going to these different areas of the world where it's, Chinese fishermen, who spent their entire lives around the ocean, fishermen, and who, gain so much from, the sea, you know, maybe their traditions, at times were to give back, that body, or what did that look like? Or yeah, I mean, you, I mean, what time period and
Yeah.
where do we want to
Totally,
take it, right?
totally right for
So
this kind of story.
I just want to see the real history, the facts, if we're talking about the past. But if we're talking about the present, like, hey, what a great opportunity to get in front of the masses,
Hmm.
right? And everyone's affected through with death, right? I mean, it's all our
Mm-hmm.
final destination. And
Hmm.
and so it's interesting, and y'all got my wheels turning, when we first got introduced and with this podcast. So I'm excited to see where,
Yeah.
maybe some of these conversations that come from this, and I ask if you find the opportunity out there, we would love to jump on board and work with production and or the writers and help, make sure, they're making the best, representation of
Yeah.
eco-friendly, sea burial, traditional sea burial.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
love it.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I was gonna, so where can folks find you and find more information about this?
Yeah, well, my name's Dax Patton, and I'm at Dax, DAX, PATTON, everywhere. But more importantly, Spirit Oceano Foundation, spiritoceano.org, Spirit Oceano, ocean with an O.org, and then at Spirit Oceano on Instagram, or you can find us on Facebook. And we even
Mm-hmm.
started a Facebook group focused on burial at sea, because we wanted to
Mm.
create a space, a community where people can talk about it and normalize that conversation like we were
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Awesome.
And
Amazing.
yes, yeah. Thank you so much. This has been really great.
Yeah, it's so cool hearing
Yeah.
about what people are doing out there in the world. And we appreciate, your efforts to bring a spotlight to this and kind of, shake things up and reimagine. So, yeah,
Yeah.
let's see how this storyline continues and what that normalization may look like out there.
I love it. Today, we're trying, it's kind of moving towards, building a team. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking to, find a replacement, executive director for me,
Mm.
and find a team that we can empower,
Mm-hmm.
to really push this forward, that can give 100% of their focus. So I'm excited about focusing on that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
excited about meeting scientists and biologists and anyone studying the ocean,
Yeah.
so we can collaborate and work together. And then
Yeah.
grants and we just got our 501(c)(3) status and got our donations page up. So we are trying to like get the funds together to really, really push this agenda forward. And yeah, so that's that's where our focus is today. And I just wanted to, share
Love
that.
it. And
Yeah.
and I think for me, I always, I followed a non-linear path as well. So it was nice to hear, again, it's not linear, right, in life. It's you do these things and then that you jump off there and then you get there. So
Yeah.
that's always fun to hear people's origin stories and how they got to where they are today.
Totally. Well, stay in touch, Dax. We're really curious how this all plays out, and would love to keep in touch.
I look forward to it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Our designer is Aaliyah Kane. Music is by Peter Chapman. Our producer is Colin Miller.